So yeah, I had to prove that I could talk to people and interview people. And then when I started the show, they were like, you know, you can't make reference that you're gay, don't bring it up, don't even.
At 67, Ellen DeGeneres has come out and said what many suspected all along. She moved to the UK because Donald Trump became the US president again. She and her wife Portia are now saying they plan never to go back. Keep watching this video as we take a deeper look at what exactly caused Ellen to make such a life-changing choice and what she plans to do next. Ellen DeGeneres backstory, where exactly she lives now, and when she confirmed the rumors. Ellen Lee DeGeneres was born in 1958 in the quiet suburb of Metairie, Louisiana. She grew up like any other kid with big dreams and a lot of curiosity. But before she became famous, she tried all kinds of regular jobs. She worked as a waitress, painted houses, and even shucked oysters to pay the bills. However, comedy was always calling her. So in the late 70s, she began doing stand-up in small coffee houses and little clubs, slowly finding her voice and her audience. Her big break came in 1986 when she performed on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Back then, a spot on that show could launch a career, and it did just that for Ellen. From there, she built a name for herself with quick wit and a friendly, sometimes sarcastic style that people loved. By the mid-90s, she had her own sitcom simply called Ellen. Fast forward to 1997, and she shocked the entertainment world when she came out as gay, both on her show and in real life. That move was brave for the time, and it cost her work for a while. Advertisers backed away and networks grew cold. But Ellen kept pushing forward. Years later, she found an even bigger stage. In 2003, she launched The Ellen DeGeneres Show, a daytime talk show that became a cultural force. For almost 20 years, she danced with guests, handed out big prizes, and mixed heartwarming moments with playful humor. The show collected dozens of awards and helped make Ellen one of the most recognizable entertainers on the planet. But after reports of a toxic workplace and her own feeling that the time was right, she wrapped it up in 2022. That brings us to her next chapter. In the fall of 2024, Ellen and her wife, actress Portia de Rossi, quietly packed up their California life and headed across the Atlantic. They chose the Cotswolds, a picture-perfect region of England, known for rolling hills, stone cottages, and villages that look like something from a storybook. Their property is not just a cute little cottage either. It's a sprawling estate with historic buildings and wide-open fields. At first, the plan was to live there part-time, maybe 3 or 4 months each year, just enough to get a taste of English country life. But Ellen and Portia dove in deeper than they expected. They renovated the place in record time, mixing the old charm of the stone farmhouse with modern comforts. Portia moved her beloved horses across the ocean, which is not exactly a small task. Ellen brought in chickens and even tried raising sheep, although she later joked the sheep had a habit of escaping like tiny woolly criminals. She also got to experience snow for the first time in her life, which surprised a lot of fans considering how much she has traveled. While everyone admired the move, rumors started flying. Was this just a lifestyle change or something bigger? Many people guessed it was about politics, especially as the United States geared up for another heated election. Ellen kept quiet for a while. She posted cheerful clips of her new farm life, but never explained the deeper reason. Friends and fans kept wondering if there was more to the story. The answer finally came in July 2025 during a live conversation in Cheltenham, a historic town not far from her new home. British broadcaster Richard Bacon asked her the question everyone wanted to know. Did she move because Donald Trump had been re-elected? Ellen didn't dodge or give a vague answer. She said yes. She explained that she and Portia arrived in England the day before the election. They went to bed not knowing the result. and woke up to a flood of texts filled with crying emojis. She looked at Portia and simply said, "He got in." At that moment, they decided to stay for good. That confirmation put all the whispers to rest. Ellen admitted that politics in the United States, especially the growing push to roll back rights for same-sex couples, played a huge role in their decision. She described America as a place that can still feel scary for people trying to live openly and honestly. She and Portia even talked about marrying again in England if U.S. laws on gay marriage were ever reversed. It was a mix of serious concern and practical planning. The move also reflects Ellen's love for a quieter life. She has said that everything in the Cotswolds feels simpler and kinder. The villages are beautiful, the air feels cleaner, and the people are polite in a way that still surprises her. She enjoys the slower pace after decades in the spotlight, and there's a bit of humor in how she describes it too. She laughs about chickens that wander wherever they please and sheep that stage daring escapes. But it's clear she's genuinely happy in this new environment. Ellen's decision shows how much she has changed over the years. From a young comic hustling in smoky clubs to a household name with a global audience, she's always been willing to take risks when something matters. Moving across an ocean at 67 is no small step, especially when it means leaving behind the country that made her famous. But for Ellen and Portia, the choice came down to living where they feel safe, respected, and free to be themselves. So now Ellen DeGeneres lives among the rolling green hills of the English countryside, far from Hollywood's constant buzz. She tends her chickens, rides horses with Portia, and occasionally pops into town where locals treat her like any other neighbor. And when people ask why she left the United States for good, she no longer hesitates. The answer is clear, and as she proved on that Cheltenham stage, refreshingly honest. Ellen's take on life in the UK versus the US, and why LGBTQ+ rights still weigh on her mind. When Ellen DeGeneres talks about life in the English countryside, you can hear the relief in her voice. After decades of bright lights, talk show schedules, and the constant buzz of Los Angeles, she says the Cotswolds feel like an entirely different planet in the best way possible. "It's just better," she told a live audience earlier this year. And she didn't mean it as a cheap shot at the United States. She was simply describing the peace she's found. She talks about the villages and small towns with real affection, pointing out how the honey-colored stone houses catch the late afternoon light, and how even the smallest shops seem to have history built into their walls. To her, the architecture isn't just pretty, it feels like a daily reminder that life doesn't have to race forward all the time. Another thing she loves is how polite people are. It's not the forced politeness of a customer service script. It's the little things like neighbors who pause to chat on narrow lanes, and strangers who apologize if they brush past you at the market. After years in a city where everyone is rushing to the next meeting or audition, Ellen finds the simple courtesy refreshing. She often jokes that even the animals seem better behaved. "They treat animals better here," she says, half laughing but half serious. That respect for animals fits perfectly with the life she and Portia are building. Portia brought her beloved horses across the ocean, a complicated and expensive process that shows how committed they were to the move. Ellen herself decided to dive into country living. As earlier mentioned, she added chickens and sheep to the property, but they always tried to escape. The story always gets a big laugh when she tells it. Funny though, at 67, Ellen experienced a proper snowfall for the first time in her life. She describes standing outside as flakes drifted down, the whole countryside going quiet, and feeling like a kid again. But her love for the Cotswolds isn't just about postcard moments. It's tied to something heavier. It's basically about the way she feels about what's happening back in the United States. Ellen has never been shy about being openly gay, but she admits that the atmosphere in America can still feel frightening for people who are simply trying to live as themselves. She says it's not only about loud acts of hate. It's the quieter, constant worry that comes with knowing your rights might not be permanent. Visibility doesn't always equal safety, she explained, noting that even though LGBTQ+ people are more present in media and politics than ever, that doesn't mean their daily lives are free from risk. Her concern isn't abstract. She's been watching legal battles unfold and was alarmed when the Southern Baptist Convention voted to endorse efforts aimed at reversing same-sex marriage. For a couple who married in California in 2008 and again in 2009 after legal hurdles, the idea that marriage equality could be rolled back is personal. Ellen has said that if U.S. laws ever change, she and Portia might marry again in England, just to be sure their relationship is protected. It's a mix of practicality, quiet defiance, and doing what they need to stay safe and recognized. She also talks about how many LGBTQ+ Americans remain cautious about being open, even in 2025. While some cities feel welcoming, other areas can be intimidating. People still lose jobs or face family rejection for coming out. Laws vary widely from state to state, and what feels secure one year can be challenged the next. Ellen knows this from experience. When she came out on her sitcom in the late 90s, her career nearly collapsed. That memory never really goes away. She often points out that progress isn't a straight line, as it can move forward and then slide back, sometimes overnight. This is where the contrast with her new life becomes sharp. In the Cotswolds, she feels a sense of calm and permanence. The villages have stood for centuries. The legal protections for same-sex couples in the UK feel settled and stable. She can walk hand in hand with Portia without wondering if someone is going to make it an issue. It just feels safer, she says, not as a boast, but as a simple fact of her daily reality. Ellen also likes to highlight the difference in how people handle disagreements. In the U.S., political arguments often flare into personal attacks, especially online. But in rural England, she finds that even when people have strong opinions, they tend to keep the conversation civil. That slower, more measured culture gives her space to breathe. After years of being a public figure who had to respond to every rumor and headline, she treasures the quiet. Friends who visit say they can see the change in her. She seems lighter, funnier in a relaxed way, and more willing to disappear into the background when she wants. She still keeps up with American news, of course, and she votes by mail, but the constant tension that used to hang over her has eased. She jokes that the only big drama now is whether the chickens will cooperate when it's time to close the coop at night. None of this means she has turned her back on the U.S. She still cares deeply about what happens there and speaks up when she feels it's important. But she no longer feels she has to live in the middle of it. Moving overseas gave her a sense of agency at a time when many people feel powerless. It was her way of saying, "I choose peace, and I choose to protect the life I've built with Portia." What stands out most when Ellen talks about these changes is how grounded she sounds. She isn't preaching or trying to convince anyone to follow her lead. She's just sharing what has worked for her, which is finding a place where kindness, history, and legal security line up in a way that lets her exhale. The contrast between her tranquil days in the English countryside and the uncertainty she feels when she looks back at the U.S. says a lot about where she is in life. She still tells funny stories about chickens on the loose or the shock of her first snowball fight. But there's always a deeper current beneath the humor. It's the awareness that freedoms can be fragile and that sometimes the bravest move is to quietly protect what matters most. For Ellen, that means a stone farmhouse in the Cotswolds, a flock of hens, a few mischievous sheep she hasn't given up on completely, and the knowledge that she and Portia can live openly without looking over their shoulders. And after everything she's achieved and endured, that simple piece might be the most radical thing of all. Ellen DeGeneres, on owning her past and starting over across the pond. When Ellen DeGeneres stepped on stage in Cheltenham this past summer, the crowd probably expected a few light jokes about British weather or maybe a story about her chickens. Instead, she went straight at the topic that has followed her for years: the controversy that swirled around her daytime talk show. Everyone remembers the headlines. In 2020, former employees accused the Ellen DeGeneres show of being a toxic workplace. Stories of intimidation, fear, and alleged misconduct filled gossip columns and serious news outlets alike. It wasn't just a single bad week of press. It became a rolling storm. Ellen, who had built an entire TV brand around the idea of kindness, suddenly found herself accused of fostering the opposite. 3 senior producers were eventually fired. Advertisers watched closely. Viewers wondered if the show's famous dancing and surprise giveaways were covering something darker. Ellen apologized on air. She didn't duck the issue, but her public mea culpa didn't erase the sting. Ratings slid. The chatter didn't let up. By 2022, after almost 2 decades of confetti, celebrity interviews, and viral moments, she brought the show to an end. She framed the finale as a natural conclusion, but everyone knew the workplace scandal sped things along. Even loyal fans admitted the joyful vibe felt different once those accusations were out in the open. At Cheltenham, she revisited it all, and you could hear a mix of defiance and hurt in her voice. She told the audience she's always been a direct, blunt person, and in Hollywood that can read as mean. Does being blunt have to mean being mean? She asked, genuinely puzzled. She said it still hurts that some people believe she's cruel when, in her words, she knows herself to be compassionate and empathetic. The way she put it, she's the same person she was when America first fell in love with her quick wit and generous spirit. Just older, maybe a little sharper, but not unkind. The irony, of course, is that her talk show's entire brand was, "Be kind to one another." That cheerful sign-off became an easy target once the allegations landed. Critics said the slogan turned hollow. Ellen doesn't deny that some staff had bad experiences, but she pushes back on the idea that she personally orchestrated a toxic environment. To hear her tell it, she was running a giant production with hundreds of employees and trusted the wrong people to handle the day-to-day. She also points out that a lot of the accusations against her personally boiled down to moments when she was brisk or to the point. Qualities that, if she were a man, might have been called decisive. Leaving the show wasn't just about reputation management. It also cracked open her life in an unexpected way. After years of 4 a.m. call times and endless publicity schedules, she suddenly had space to breathe and to decide where she wanted to be. That's where the story bends toward the English countryside. By late 2024, Ellen and her wife, Portia de Rossi, quietly bought a house in the Cotswolds. They arrived just before the U.S. presidential election that sent Donald Trump back to the White House. Text messages from friends flooded in with crying face emojis. Ellen has joked that those messages confirmed what she and Portia were already feeling. Maybe it was time to stay put. The move wasn't a hasty escape. It was a slow realization that their next chapter could be calmer, more private, and far away from the pressure cooker of American celebrity culture. It's easy to see the appeal. In Los Angeles, paparazzi camp outside your gate. In rural England, the neighbors mostly want to talk about the weather or lend you a ladder. For someone who'd spent years being dissected by tabloids and social media, the Cotswolds offered a level of anonymity that felt like a gift. Ellen could walk down a lane with Portia or tend to her chickens without wondering who was snapping a photo. The controversies and the move are tied together more tightly than she sometimes admits. Publicly, she frames the relocation as a chance for peace and a break from American politics. Privately, friends say it was also about shedding the old narrative. In California, she would always be Ellen, the talk show host, who fell from grace. In a sleepy English village, she could just be Ellen, the neighbor with the runaway sheep. That doesn't mean she's pretending the past never happened. At Cheltenham, she sounded reflective, almost philosophical. She talked about how fame can freeze a person in time. People expect you to stay exactly as you were when they first discovered you. Any sign of growth or change can be misread as arrogance or cruelty. She's still learning to let that go. "You have to live with the truth you know," she said, a line that landed with the weight of someone who has taken a few public punches. There's a certain irony in the whole arc. Ellen became a star in the 1990s by taking bold risks. She came out on her sitcom when almost no major TV lead had done so. She weathered that storm, rebuilt her career, and spent 20 years as a beacon of easygoing kindness on daytime TV. Then the culture shifted again, and the same bluntness that once made her groundbreaking suddenly made her a target. Moving to the UK isn't running away. It's her way of choosing which battles are worth fighting and which headlines to ignore. She hasn't abandoned her sense of humor about it either. She jokes about learning British slang and figuring out which side of the road to look at when crossing the street. But underneath the jokes is someone who has clearly thought hard about reinvention. Ending the talk show and leaving America weren't random choices. They were a conscious pivot. She's no longer the daily face of a billion-dollar TV franchise. She's a woman in her 60s, rediscovering what life looks like without a studio audience. The Cotswolds, with its stone cottages and quiet lanes, has given her room to do that. She can still be direct. Villagers probably know exactly what she thinks about the muddy winter paths, but she's doing it on her own terms, without the constant feedback loop of Hollywood gossip. The controversies may always be part of her public story, but they don't define the day-to-day life she's chosen. As she wrapped up the Cheltenham talk, Ellen left the audience with a thought that sums up this new chapter. People can believe what they want. I know who I am. It wasn't defiant so much as settled, the kind of line you deliver when you've survived a media storm, ended a career on your own timetable, and found a quieter world where the loudest thing you hear is your own laughter, and maybe the clucking of a few very opinionated chickens. For now, she seems happy letting ideas percolate. She gardens, rides horses with Portia, and takes long walks through villages that have stood for hundreds of years. But boredom has a way of nudging creative people back into action. If history is any guide, when Ellen finally decides what's next, it won't be predictable. It might be a podcast recorded in her barn, a surprise comedy tour across Europe, a quirky documentary about English sheep, or even a reinvented talk show that lives entirely online. Whatever form it takes, she'll approach it with the same mix of curiosity and dry humor that made millions of people tune in for years. And with that said, head to the comments and tell us what you think of Ellen DeGeneres' move to the UK. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell for more inside scoops on the world's most famous and controversial people.